Sophia held her husband Ricardo's hand. It was cold, papery thin. The vibrant life that had filled it, now just a faint memory. From their bedroom window, the distant lights of Madrid seemed to mock the darkness that was gathering in the room. He had been a man of formidable honor, a judge whose reputation for integrity was his greatest treasure. Now he was a whisper. "Promise me," Ricardo rasped, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. His other hand fumbled under his pillow, retrieving a thick yellowed envelope. It was sealed with a heavy dark red wax, stamped with an ornate family crest centuries old. "Take this to Father Mateo. He'll know what to do." "You must not open it, Sophia. No one must. The honor of our family, it's all in here." Sophia took the letter. Its weight was more than just paper and wax. It was the weight of a 40-year marriage, of secrets she had helped him keep, of a final duty. It was her martyrdom, to protect the memory of a good man, even when she knew that confession within could absolve her of the silent sacrifices she had made in his name. "I promise," she whispered, sealing her fate with his. He squeezed her hand one last time, a flicker of peace in his eyes, and then he was gone. The funeral was a pageant of respectable grief. Their only son, Javier, handsome and hollow-eyed in his tailored suit, stood by her side. He was the very picture of filial piety. A week later, Sophia called him into the study, the same room where her father had written his final testament. She placed the heavy envelope on the polished mahogany desk between them. "Your father's last wish. You will take this to Father Mateo at the cathedral. You will not open it. You will not break the seal. This is a matter of family honor, Javier." He took the letter, his expression somber. "Of course, Mother. I understand." He kissed her cheek, the scent of expensive cologne a sharp contrast to the room's musty scent of old books and grief. He never delivered it. The first cut was a small one. 2 weeks later, Javier mentioned needing a small loan, a bridging loan, he'd called it, for a promising real estate venture. Only 10,000 euros, a temporary problem. Sophia, still lost in the fog of her new widowhood, transferred the money from her savings without question. The second cut was deeper. A month after that, she saw him wearing a new watch, a gleaming Rolex, that he casually explained away as a bonus from a grateful client. She knew his finances. She knew there was no client and no bonus. Then came the phone calls, first one, then another. Hushed, angry voices on the other end of the line when she answered Javier's phone by mistake. Voices that spoke of poker debts and deadlines. He always dismissed them. "Business disputes," he would say, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. The conspiracy revealed itself on a Tuesday. Sophia was searching for an old photo album in the dusty attic when she heard Javier's voice from his home office below, thin and sharp through the floorboards. He was on the phone, his tone a wretched mix of desperation and scheming. "No, listen, the letter is worthless parchment. It's the seal that has value. Yes, 16th century, papal origin. The collector in Belgium will pay 40,000 euros for it alone. Of course, the old woman knows nothing. She thinks I delivered it to some dusty old priest weeks ago. I'll burn the letter tonight. No evidence. Just a story about a lost heirloom." Sophia froze, the dusty air catching in her throat. Her son, her Javier, selling his father's soul for 40,000 euros. It wasn't just a betrayal of a promise. It was the desecration of a sanctuary, the pillaging of a memory. She remained in the attic for an hour, sitting on an old trunk, her body numb, her mind a storm of chilling clarity. When she finally came downstairs, her face was a mask of serene, controlled grief. Javier was on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. "Javier," she began, her voice impossibly calm, "I was speaking with Father Mateo's assistant today." Javier's eyes darted up from his phone, a flicker of alarm he quickly suppressed. "Oh, and how is the old man?" he asked, a little too casually. "She mentioned that she handles all his correspondence now. She said he hadn't received any personal letters, especially not one from your father." Javier's face paled. He stood up, forcing a condescending laugh. "Mother, you're confused. I delivered it weeks ago, just as you asked. The priest is an old man. His assistant is probably incompetent. You're letting your grief cloud your judgment." He walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of false concern. "You've been through a lot. You should rest. Stop imagining things." Sophia looked at the hand on her shoulder, then up into her son's eyes. "I am not imagining anything, Javier, and I am no longer grieving. I am simply balancing the books." He stared at her, the condescension in his eyes slowly turning to fear as he realized he was not looking at a confused old woman, but at the executor of a long overdue audit.
That night, Sophia did not sleep in the marital bed. She went to Ricardo's study, a room she had barely entered since his passing. It still smelled of him. Old leather, pipe tobacco, and the faint, acidic scent of law books. She sat in his worn armchair, the letter, now just a desecrated piece of paper with a jagged tear where the seal had been, on the desk before her. Javier's betrayal was a cold, hard stone in her chest. She had moved past grief, into a state of chilling clarity. Her son had not simply broken a promise. He had audited his father's legacy and found it worth less than a gambler's marker. It was time, she decided, to conduct an audit of her own. She unlocked a small, hidden safe behind a panel of law journals, a safe even Ricardo hadn't known about. Inside was a small, high-definition digital recorder and a laptop. Her strategic retreat had been planned weeks ago, born of a gnawing suspicion that had taken root long before her husband's death. The first person she called was Elena, her oldest and most trusted friend. Elena arrived within the hour, her face a mask of concern. "Sophia, what is it? I came as soon as I got your message." Sophia said nothing. She simply turned the laptop around. On the screen was a frozen image from a hidden camera, time-stamped 2 weeks prior. The angle was tight, grainy, shot from a high corner inside the dark wood of the cathedral's confessional booth. Javier was on his knees, his face turned towards the unseen priest, his expression anguished. "My God," Elena breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "What have you done?" "What I had to do," Sophia replied, her voice flat. "Ricardo was tormented by his secret. I was terrified Javier would fail in his duty. I needed to know the confession was made." She pointed to the screen. But Javier never confessed his father's sins. He was confessing his own. The weapon was revealed. Sophia pressed play. Javier's voice, muffled and choked with performative guilt, filled the quiet study. "And bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 2 months since my last confession. I have been irresponsible with my family's finances. I have been taking small amounts, skimming from the investment portfolio my father entrusted me to. For my debts, the gambling. I know it's wrong, Father. I tell myself it's just borrowing, that I'll pay it back. I promised God I will." Elena's face hardened. "The whole time, while he was holding his father's sacred letter, he was stealing from you both." Sophia nodded, her expression unreadable. "He used the sanctity of the confessional to absolve himself of one betrayal while actively committing another. He performed his guilt, got his penance, and went right back to his sins. She paused. And he sold his father's honor for 40,000 euros. Sophia then told Elena everything about the burned letter, the black market collector, the grotesque transactional nature of her son's soul. Elena's fury was a proxy for her own. That parasitic, dishonorable! She paced the room, unable to contain her rage. You must destroy him, Sophia. You must show him what real consequences look like. I will, Sophia said, but not with emotion, with procedure. She opened a new file on her laptop. It was a single, high-resolution still frame from the recording. Javier's face, clearly identifiable inside the confessional. She drafted a short, anonymous email. The recipient was not Father Mateo. It was the Archbishop's Administrative Council, the body that oversaw the cathedral's finances and, more importantly, its reputation. The message was simple, clinical, and devastating. To whom it may concern, the man pictured below, Javier Mendoza, was recently appointed to your lay committee for the cathedral's Charity Restoration Fund. Is this the sort of man you wish to entrust with the donations of the faithful? She attached the image and pressed send. No signature, no explanation, just a single undeniable fact. An audit delivered to the highest authority. The first quiet detonation was complete. And now? Elena asked, watching her friend. Now, Sophia said, closing the laptop, we wait for the church to balance its books. She sat back in Ricardo's chair, the weight of her decision settling upon her. She had weaponized the confessional, a sin she would one day have to account for. But she had also set in motion a reckoning for her son, a process of divine and procedural justice from which there would be no escape. The phone call, she knew, would come soon. Her only question was whether it would be the priest or the police. The final shot. 2 days pass in silence. Sophia's watering plants in her serene sunlit conservatory. Her phone, lying on a nearby glass table, buzzes. The caller ID is stark and unmissable. The Cathedral of Almudena. She looks at the ringing phone, her expression unreadable, and does not move to answer it. The call rings out, a shrill, insistent question hanging in the air. The war for the narrative had begun.
Javier's counterattack was faster and crueler than Sophia had anticipated. The anonymous email to the archdiocese did not trigger a quiet investigation, but a panicked call from the archbishop to his nephew seeking clarity. Trapped, Javier did not choose repentance, he chose war. His battlefield, his own mother's honor. He called an emergency family council at his aunt's house, not including Sophia. His narrative was a masterpiece of manipulation. My mother is unwell, he told his uncle Carlos, Ricardo's brother, a man whose reputation in Madrid's financial world was as formidable as his late brother's in the judiciary. Grief has consumed her. She's delusional, imagining conspiracies. She has installed cameras in the house of God. He presented her sin as if it were his own, the desperate act of a deranged widow harassing her only son. This photo she sent is proof of her tragic decline. She is trying to ruin my charitable reputation because she feels abandoned. The family, with no other version of events, reacted with a predictable mix of pity and shame. The public frame was set. Sophia was not a strategist. She was a pitiable widow. News of the meeting reached Sophia through a furious call from Elena. "They're painting you as a madwoman," Elena hissed over the phone. "Javier is using your own grief against you. You have to do something, Sophia. Call Carlos. Tell him the truth." But Sophia remained silent, sitting in the stillness of Ricardo's study, the echo of Elena's weeping still in the air. She would not react with emotion. She would respond with procedure. Elena's fury was the audience's fuel. Sophia's calm was her own. While her house phone rang with calls from concerned and condescending family members, she executed her next precise counterstrike. The photo was just the bait. The audio recording was the poison. She edited the audio file of Javier's confession, leaving only his clear, trembling voice detailing not just his gambling debts, but his methodical siphoning of funds from the family investment portfolio, a crime not just against trust, but against the law. A crime that would shame his Uncle Carlos, who had helped establish that very portfolio for Ricardo years ago. The recipient of this second strike was not the Archbishop. It was his Uncle Carlos. She attached the audio file to a new anonymous email with a single chilling line of text. Sometimes confessions reveal more than one kind of sin. Listen closely. She knew that the power did not lie in her own voice, which was now publicly discredited by her son. The power lay in an irrefutable third party, a man of honor and power who could not ignore such damning evidence. There was no plea, no defense, just the cold, hard proof of a nephew who had not only disgraced a sacred trust, but was also a thief. The war for the narrative had turned. It was no longer a grieving widow's word against her concerned sons. It was Javier's recorded voice against his own lie. And, as she imagined her brother-in-law Carlos, alone in his office, listening to his nephew's detailed betrayal in his own guilty words, Sophia wondered, what will a man of honor do when he discovers the blood he shares is corrupt? The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Uncle Carlos did not move with fury, but with the quiet, devastating precision of a surgeon removing a cancer. After listening to his nephew's recorded confession 3 times in the grim quiet of his investment office, he did not call Javier. He called his forensic accountant. Javier's failed attack became the first of many gratifying payoffs for Sophia. Javier's first desperate counterattack came in the form of a manipulative apology. He arrived at Sophia's home 2 days after she sent the audio, carrying a bouquet of white lilies, his mother's favorite flower, a detail designed to disarm. "Mother," he began, his voice a practiced blend of remorse, "the family is worried about you. What I did, sending that photo, it was wrong, but I did it out of love, to force them to see that you need help." Sophia watched him calmly from the threshold of the study door, not inviting him in. "The only person who needs help, Javier, is you. Perhaps with the Securities and Exchange Commission?" The color drained from Javier's face. "Uncle Carlos has been asking questions," he whispered, the facade crumbling. "I gave him the truth," Sophia interrupted, her voice like ice. "A luxury you seem incapable of affording." She closed the study door in his face, the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place, a final satisfying slam. The apology had failed. The public exposure, the second desperate counterattack, was even more spectacular. At the annual hospital charity gala, which the family had attended for generations, Javier tried to corner Sophia. Surrounded by Madrid's elite, he pleaded with his grieving and confused mother to come to her senses, his voice ringing with false concern. It was then that Uncle Carlos stepped forward, not to support his nephew, but to annihilate him. "Javier," Carlos said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that silenced the nearby crowd, "perhaps you should explain to Don Emilio," he gestured to the head of the hospital foundation, "why the preliminary audit reports on your late father's estate show a discrepancy of 150,000 euros. As the head of the portfolio, I'd be particularly interested in that explanation." The humiliation was instant and total. Javier's narrative house of cards collapsed under the weight of an undeniable financial fact. The public lie had been exposed.
The most depraved gamut writes the church bait. A week later, desperate, Javier approached Sofia after Sunday Mass. With tears in his eyes, he confessed to Father Mateo in front of other parishioners that his mother had framed him, that she had doctored audio evidence to destroy him out of spite. It was an act of desecration, using the sanctuary itself as the stage for his final fraud. But Sofia was prepared. She had anticipated this gambit. "Father Mateo," Sofia said calmly, approaching the two men, "since we are in the business of confessions, why don't you have Javier tell you about the Belgian collector who bought his father's seal for 40,000 euros in cash?" She paused, letting the words drop like stones into a silent well. "Or should we perhaps discuss the fact that my own private investigator photographed the transaction last week?" The checkmate was undeniable. Javier stared at her not with fury but with the hollow understanding of a man utterly out-strategized. The war was over. The auditor had presented the final bill. Sofia met with Elena in Ricardo's study that evening. She had won, not with shouting, but with receipts, not with hysterics, but with meticulously executed strategy. The final stage was upon her, to salty earth so that nothing of this nature could ever grow again.
The final judgment did not take place in a court of law, but in the solemn quiet of Ricardo's study. Sofia sat in her late husband's leather armchair, a silent observer. Uncle Carlos sat behind the desk, not as a family member, but as the executor of a long-overdue audit. Javier stood before him, stripped of his arrogance, his expensive suit hanging on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. On the desk between them lay a single folder, the forensic accountant's final report. "You have embezzled a total of 212,000 euros from the family investment portfolio over the past 3 years, Carlos began, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have incurred gambling debts of over 80,000 euros using family assets as collateral, and you have sold an irreplaceable family heirloom to cover a fraction of it." "Uncle, please," Javier pleaded, his voice a bare whisper. "I can fix it. I'll pay it back." "No," Carlos said flatly. "You are no longer in a position to fix anything." He opened the folder. "Effective immediately, your access to all family trust funds is revoked. Your seat on the board of your father's charitable foundation has been terminated. A lien has been placed on your apartment, which will be sold to cover the misappropriated funds. The Rolex, which we now understand was purchased with stolen money, will be returned. And as you no longer have a demonstrable income, the bank has been notified to repossess the car." It was a complete, methodical, and total dismantling. Javier collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, his body racked with quiet, choked sobs. For the first time, he addressed Sofia directly. "Mother, please," he wept. "I'm your son. You can't let him do this to me." Sofia looked at him, and for a moment the ghost of the mother she had been wanted to comfort him, but the woman she had become held her ground. "You burned your father's final confession, Javier. You burned his honor for cash. There is nothing I can do. The debt must be paid. The books must be balanced." Javier's fall was swift and unceremonious. Elena relayed the aftermath to Sofia with quiet sadness. His apartment was sold within a month. He moved into a single rented room in a distant neighborhood. His society friends, who had once flocked to his parties, now crossed the street to avoid him. The villain's collapse was as complete as his betrayal. A week after the meeting, a letter arrived at Sofia's door. It was hand-delivered, slipped under the threshold. The envelope was cheap and thin. Javier's handwriting, once bold and confident, was now the shaky scrawl of a broken man. It was not an apology. It was a plea, an inventory of his despair. He wrote of his loneliness, his humiliation of having nothing left.
Sophia took the letter, not fully unfolded, to the study. She lit a small fire in the hearth, the same place she suspected Javier had burned his father's confession. She pulled out the paper, recognizing the cadence of self-pity, and then, without reading further, she let it fall into the flames. She watched the paper blacken, curl, and turn to ash. The smoke drifted up the chimney, carrying her son's last words away, just as he had disposed of his father's. The ledger was balanced, the account was closed. She felt no triumph, only a quiet, desolate peace.
6 months later, Sophia stood on the balcony of a small, sun-drenched apartment overlooking the Mediterranean. She had sold the grand family home in Madrid, the source of so much honor and so much pain, and moved to a quiet coastal town where the only history that mattered was the tide. The heavy, dark furniture of her old life was gone, replaced by simple, light pieces in wicker and linen. This was her new sanctuary, bought not with inheritance, but with the quiet proceeds from her own long-neglected investments. It was a space built not for show, but for breathing. She had found a new community, not in high society, but in the hushed halls of the local municipal archive, where she volunteered twice a week, helping to restore antique books. There, she worked alongside a retired history professor named Mateo, a gentleman with ink-stained fingers and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of centuries. They rarely spoke of their pasts, finding a more profound connection in the careful work of mending torn pages and reinforcing brittle spines. They were both in the business of preservation, of honoring what was true and valuable. The final report on Javier came not as a dramatic letter, but as a quiet factual update in a phone call with Uncle Carlos. He had found work, a menial logistics job in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. He was paying his debts slowly, painfully. The grand life had evaporated, leaving only the stark reality of his choices. He had not called his mother again. The ledger, both financial and emotional, had been balanced. There was nothing more to say. That afternoon, Elena visited. Her university textbooks spread across Sophia's new dining table. She looked up from her studies as Sophia brought them both glasses of iced tea. "Tio Carlos told me about Papa," Solena said softly. "He said he's working." "Yes," Sophia said, "he is." Elena was quiet for a moment, then looked around the bright, airy apartment. "It feels peaceful here." "It is," Sophia agreed. A genuine, unburdened smile touched her lips for the first time in years. "It is earned peace." Sophia's journey proved that honor is not a relic to be sold, but a ledger to be balanced, and the most devastating audits are conducted not with fury, but with facts. If you believe in the power of a balanced ledger, subscribe to this channel and witness the next audit. What was the one small thing someone did that proved their disrespect was intentional?